NFL season is officially here, and we just got to see the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Dallas Cowboys 24-20. So in today's video, I want to give you guys my biggest takeaways and reaction to the Dallas Cowboys versus the Philadelphia Eagles. Subscribe and like the video if you do go on to enjoy. Let's hop into it. So yes, we are here. The Philadelphia Eagles just beat the Dallas Cowboys 24-20, and I actually think despite this game only being one game into the season, we just learned a lot about both these teams, the defending champs and the Dallas Cowboys, who I think will be pretty good this year. So we'll start this video off by just kind of briefly covering some of my biggest takeaways of the game. Then I want to talk about each individual team and kind of go through each sort of category of offense and defense. So in terms of the overall game, look, this was a bizarre week one game. We saw an ejection to one of the best players in the entire game on the very first, not even snap, the very first time the two teams took the field. You see an ejection of Jalen Carter, which really stupid play by him. You just simply cannot do that. This is a big game, a big moment, and he spits on the quarterback. Yes, I know Dak spit in his direction, but I don't know if it was necessarily intended to be a slight at him. I can't tell you what was going through Dak's head. But in response, Jalen Carter spits on the dude's jersey, and he gets tossed out the game. Just something you don't want to see from one of your star players. Hopefully he learns from this, but it's got to be pretty disappointing for a lot of Philadelphia fans because we do know he fell down the draft for a little bit of sort of this reason, some maturity issues. So I guess we'll wait and see if there's extra punishment that happens for maybe a future game, or maybe Philadelphia decides to, suspend him themselves. Then you had the third quarter fumble, and then directly after it, you had the 1 hour weather delay. In some ways, it just completely zapped the entire momentum of the game. You had such a fun and entertaining and high scoring first half. Then you come out the gates, Philly scores a field goal, Dallas is driving, they have the big turnover, and all of a sudden, all momentum is on Philadelphia's side. Then you get the weather delay, and it zapped all the momentum out of that building. I thought both quarterbacks played very well. I thought both running backs were effective. I thought CeeDee Lamb looked really good, but had some key drops. And when it comes down to coaching, Brian Schottenheimer, the new Dallas Cowboys head coach that I was not a fan of when they hired him, I thought he called a brilliant game, especially in the first half. But even in the second half, I thought there was a lot of opportunities available for Dallas. And I think that's going to be kind of my biggest takeaway of this game. What a missed opportunity for the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys went into this game as massive. I think they were 6.5 underdogs in this game, I believe, on FanDuel or maybe Prize Picks or something like that. But they were huge underdogs in this game. Everyone on the broadcast picked Philadelphia to win. The national vote had Philly like 77% chance of winning or something along those lines. And here you go. The Dallas Cowboys defensive tackle Jalen Carter kicked out of the game. Weather delay in the third quarter after a huge turnover. Landon Dickerson leaves the game as well. Everything was kind of going their way that you would want if you were a Cowboys fan. Also, as a Cowboys fan, you were probably saying Dak Prescott's playing really well. CeeDee Lamb is playing really well outside of the drops. Like, if you had told a Cowboys fan prior to this game, Landon Dickerson, Jalen Carter, weather delay, the Dallas Cowboys play very well on the offensive end, and in the second half, they figure things out defensively, I think a lot of Cowboys fans would feel pretty good about this game. But despite the Dallas Cowboys having basically every advantage out there, including the referees being really quick with their whistle, primarily against Philadelphia, the Cowboys still lost, and they had plenty of opportunities late in this game to go down and score. I think they had the ball 3 times, I think within a one-possession game, with an opportunity to actually score and take the lead, or at the bare minimum, add a field goal to make the game even closer. But you had the fumble, you had some major drops by CeeDee Lamb, and it just kind of killed the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we'll get to the Dallas Cowboys in a bit more in a sense here in a little bit, but when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles side of things as a broad perspective of the game, look, it was a very ugly game for them. The Eagles could have played a whole lot better. Defensively, they were not good in the first half. They got a little bit better in the second half. They got a bit more pressure on Dak. But this Eagles defense is going to have to pick things up. Now, again, no Jalen Carter out there, but everyone else was probably their guys. Like, these are their guys that they have to work with. And I came away with this game feeling a little bit more concerned with this defense than what I would like to feel. And on the offensive end, the Dallas Cowboys made some changes in the second half to really stifle Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. So those are some things we'll get in more detail here in a little bit, but just keep a kind of a bit of an eye on watching the film this week and seeing if other teams start to implement those changes. We'll talk about what exactly Dallas did here in just a little bit. But yeah, as a broad perspective of the game, Dallas Cowboys should have won this game. Major missed opportunity Both quarterbacks played fantastic out there today, and the Philadelphia Eagles just made enough plays down the stretch to ultimately win this game. So now I want to go ahead and talk about each individual team. I'm going to talk about the Dallas Cowboys first because in some ways, I think the more interesting story here is the Dallas Cowboys. Again, coming into this game, the Dallas Cowboys were heavy underdogs, and they kept this game close through 4 quarters. That was one of the things I wanted to see from this Dallas Cowboys team. I didn't think they were going to win this game. In fact, I kind of thought it was going to end up being a blowout. But what I wanted to see from Dallas was, could they get this game into the 4th quarter? Could they give themselves an opportunity to somehow pull off a victory? And that's exactly what they did here. They had plenty of opportunities. A couple of things go their way. We're probably talking about the Dallas Cowboys winning the game 27-24 or something along those lines. When you look at the quarterback play, Dak Prescott was 21 of 34 for 188 yards. Those numbers aren't spectacular, but when you take into account that CD had like 4 drops, those 4 drops probably would have added another 60 yards to his total. Dak very well could have ended the day 25 of 34 for 250, maybe even a touchdown thrown in there if CD gets it and all of a sudden you're in the red zone. So Dak's numbers were nowhere near as impressive as his actual game was on the field. I thought Dak was perfect out there. He made every single throw. There was no turnover worthy plays. There was one play where Quinyon Mitchell got his hands on the football, but that was more of a CeeDee Lamb fault because he slipped on his route, which then allowed Quinyon Mitchell to make a play on it. Outside of that, Dak was almost damn near perfect. Every throw he made was on the money. He was getting out of the pocket. He looked fresh. You know, obviously coming off an injury last year, you expected Dak to maybe be a little bit rusty, but that wasn't the case at all. Dak looked really good out there. Then when it came to the running backs, I think the Cowboys will take what they got out there. Javonte Williams was 15 carries for 54 yards and 2 touchdowns. Miles Sanders, 4 carries for 53 yards. Kevontae Turpin also had 2 carries as well. Now, let me get this out of the way. Miles Sanders had the better statistical game, but he had 1 big run, and he also had the major fumble, which potentially cost the Dallas Cowboys the game. When it comes to Javonte Williams, the numbers weren't impressive. 15 for 54 yards. That's a 3.6 yards per carry average. But when you actually watch the game, he was really effective in that first half. They were consistently getting 4 to 5 plus yards on every single run. And that's something the Dallas Cowboys have really struggled with the past couple years. They've really struggled to get to 2nd and 5 or 2nd and 6 or 2nd and 4 at best. It was pretty consistently 2nd and 9. 2nd and 8, sometimes even 2nd and 10, because they could not run the ball effectively. But I love sort of the schematics of this rushing attack for Dallas. Javonte Williams, I thought, had some very effective runs out there. And when they add in Jaden Blue here in a few weeks, I think he's going to be a perfect fit next to Javonte. Get Miles Sanders off the field. All right, the dude's slow. The dude's not as good. Yes, he had the big run, but if that was Jaden Blue, that goes for 6. But regardless of that, Jaden Blue could be a bit more of your speedster. Javonte can be a bit more of your workhorse. I like this running back duo from what I think it could look like after week 1. Again, I want to talk about the schematics of it. Very different look for this Dallas Cowboys offense in terms of this rushing attack. A lot of downhill, physical run blocking from this offensive line. You added Tyler Booker, who is one of the biggest and most physical linemen in this past draft. Tyler Smith is big. He's strong. Tyler Guyton, very strong as well. Terrence Steele, very strong. Cooper Beebe, very strong. So they have this really big offensive line. And last year, they wanted to do more outside runs, more zone, more get away from the middle of the offensive line. And that might have fit what Rico Dowell and Tony Pollard for the past couple of years might have wanted. But with this set of running backs, with this specific offensive line, they needed a downhill rushing attack, and they got exactly that. No Jalen Carter out there, but you were still going up against Jordan Davis, who's a really good run defender. But regardless of that, they were getting pushed. They were creating lanes. And again, when Jaden Blue gets out there, he can be that second running back, and I think he'll give you a lot of explosive plays. Now, when it comes to the receivers, CeeDee Lamb led the way with 7 catches for 110 receiving yards. George Pickens, 3 catches for 30 yards. Jake Ferguson, 5 for 23, and Kevontae Turpin, 2 for 18. I was pretty okay with what I see from this receiving core. I think there's so much potential for this passing attack. Again, CeeDee Lamb had about 3 or 4 drops that had he brought all those catches in, we're talking CD having a day, 11 receptions for 150 plus yards and, possibly the game-winning touchdown the way that things were going. I thought he had a brilliant day outside of the drop. CeeDee Lamb was just so effective out there, but then the drops happened and the drops were just really unfortunate for him. There was a drop on a crossing route and I think a 3rd and 10 situation, drops that one, the ball goes flying in the air. Then you had the deep shot miss where Dak threw it on the money right into the breadbasket of CeeDee Lamb. CD has to catch that one. That's just an easy pitch and catch that you have to get. That would have been a 40, 50-yard gain right there. Then you had the late, I think it was the 4th down play where he's running a slot fade and he gets wide open and it's just a throw right on the money. Yes, he had to leap out and make it. Tough catch, but you're, I think, the 3rd highest paid wide receiver. You got to make that catch. George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, the alignment of them was pretty interesting. They kept talking about George Pickens on one side, CeeDee Lamb on the other side. Very rarely did we see both sides or both receivers play on the same side. Occasionally we would, and that was primarily off of some sort of motion. But prior to that, though, you had both guys kind of playing opposite of each other, which really spreads out the secondary because you have this elite receiver over here and this elite receiver right here. George Pickens only had 3 catches for 30 yards, but he also did have, I believe, 1 or 2 pass interferences out there. So he was still an impactful starter out there. And as he gets more integrated in this offense, I think he's going to put up some big numbers out there. Ferguson also made some nice catches, but would have liked to have seen him have a bit better of a day. Kevontae Turpin, I think, is sort of the perfect guy, the 3rd option here. He doesn't have to get a ton of work, but he's effective in the screen game. He just gives you a different size element compared to what you have out there. So I was pretty happy with what I saw from this receiving core outside of the drops. And defensively speaking, it was about as ugly as it could have gotten in the first half, but then things started to really pick up in the second half. Defensively, they were so bad against Jalen Hurts in this rushing attack. I mean, they were averaging like 6 yards per rush. Now, a lot of that was Jalen Hurts improvising and being a good quarterback, but still, so many missed opportunities for the Dallas Cowboys in that first half to, get the ball back to their offense and, maybe make a big play to get them off the field. But pretty consistently, they couldn't do anything to stop Jalen Hurts or Saquon Barkley until the weather delay. Once the weather delay happened, they gave up 3 of the prior possessions, so they got a bit of a stop there. But then the weather delay happened, and all of a sudden, this Cowboys defense looks completely different. It seemed like in the first half, they were running a bit more of their base defense. This 4 down, 2 linebackers, a lot of guys in the secondary, and no spying the quarterback, no exotic looks, no crazy blitzes or anything like that. Whereas after the weather delay, and maybe in that first drive in the 3rd quarter, I can't quite remember that, but especially after the weather delay, it was, 7 or 8 man boxes, heavy corner blitzes. I counted 3 corner blitzes. It might have been even more than that. You saw a lot of stunting on the defensive line. The edge rushing play was really poor in that first half. Everyone was making the joke about, boy, Micah Parsons, this would have been nice to have him. And yeah, it would have been. But regardless of that, they actually had better edge play in the second half, primarily after the weather delay. Donovan Ezeraku, their 2nd-round rookie, played about as poor of a first half as you could have gotten from him. But then he really started to play a lot better in that second half, creating some havoc out there, and he looked pretty good in run fits too. So good second half for him. I thought Marshawn Nealon was very effective stuffing the run and getting after the quarterback. Wasn't really blown away with Dante Fowler out there. I felt like he was out there but wasn't really making any major plays, so keep an eye on that. Sam Williams, I thought, did a decent job out there today too. He had 3 tackles and 2 assisted tackles, so yeah, we'll take that from him. In general, I thought the edge play was poor in the first half, but really, really good in the second half. As it goes for the run defense, again, about as bad as it could have been in the first half. It looked very much like 2024. Then in the second half, they started to stack the box, send some blitzes, take away the first read, and the passing game for Jalen Hurts really never got consistently going, especially downfield. It was a lot of dinking and dunking. And then once they started to sort of contain Jalen Hurts and his legs and he wasn't making so many explosive runs, it started to get a little bit better for Dallas on the defensive end. I think the best way to break it down for Dallas is you had the first half, then you had the couple drives prior to the weather delay, and then you had the weather delay. In the first half, your offense looked great, but your defense looked pathetic. Then in the second half, prior to the weather delay, the offense goes down and almost scores, but then they have the fumble. It's, all of a sudden momentum's going all the way to Philadelphia. Then the weather delay, and then afterwards, the Dallas Cowboys offensively were still moving the football and still getting things open, but we're not converting those plays. The CeeDee Lamb drops were massive that they were converting all the way in the first half. But defensively, they gave them opportunities the entire game, except for that last play where Philadelphia gets the first down and basically wins the game right there. So yeah, Dallas, I thought, played a really good game, a really effective game. I'm really excited to see what this team looks like moving forward because Schottenheimer and Matt Eberflus, I thought, called a really solid game plan throughout the day. It wasn't the best for Eberflus in the first half, but then he locked in the second half, and I'm really intrigued to see what this Cowboys team looks like moving forward. Now on the flip side for Philadelphia, again, we could talk about all the disadvantages out there for what happened out there. The Philadelphia Eagles, without their starting defensive tackle, one of the best players on their defense, Landon Dickerson leaves the game early, and he looked pretty hurt out there. They also had 9 penalties for 110 yards. A lot of massive penalties were out there. And even though they were out total yardage by 5 extra yards, they were worse in the passing game, they still found a way to win. And so that gives me hope for this Eagles team, but also kind of concerns me a little bit. So Jalen Hurts, I thought, was really, really good out there. I thought after the weather delay portion of the game, you started to see Dallas sort of figure out Jalen Hurts a little bit. They wanted to keep him in the pocket, not let him run. And when Hurts didn't have those lanes to run the football, and they took away his first read, and they were sending some crazy blitzes, I thought it really messed with Jalen Hurts in that second half. Now, it wasn't necessarily bad from Jalen Hurts. He was making enough plays. It's just that they couldn't run the ball effectively on first down. And then on second and third down, Dallas would start to send some different looks at him with some new blitzes, some new looks, take away AJ or Devontae Smith, and then Jalen was trying to scramble and make some plays, but nothing was quite open downfield. So for Jalen, we'll keep an eye on that. Jalen Hurts is not a Joe Burrow, and with his play style, he's not somebody that's going to dissect defenses with tight window throws. He's not the most accurate of quarterbacks out there. What makes Jalen so effective is his dynamic ability to run with the football, extend plays. His feet are his ultimate superpower, and it was his superpower in the first half, but then Dallas made some adjustments in the second half to not have it hurt them as badly. So we'll keep an eye on, how teams attack Jalen Hurts in the future. I wouldn't be surprised if you see other guys follow what Dallas did with exotic blitzes, taking away the first read, and keeping him in the pocket as best as possible. Regardless, though, Jalen Hurts still was 19 of 23 for 152 with 14 carries for 62 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Jalen Hurts had a really good game. Just want to throw it out there that the second half wasn't as good. Now, when it comes to Saquon Barkley, it's kind of a similar story. He was really effective in the first 3-ish quarters. Then the fourth quarter, the Dallas Cowboys were just throwing everything at that rushing attack, and they really stuffed Saquon Barkley really effectively. I think he might have had 1 yard his final 7 carries. So they really stifled Saquon Barkley throughout this game. 18 carries for 60 yards and 1 touchdown. It wasn't anything to be concerned with. Saquon Barkley still looked super explosive, super dynamic. He looked like his 2024 version. It's just that the interior offensive line got worse with Landon Dickerson out. They had to make some movements there. And the Dallas Cowboys were stacking the box with 8 or 7 people. So unless every team does that, maybe that affects Saquon, but I'm not too overly concerned. Now, what I am somewhat concerned with is this receiving game. On the day, Jahan Dotson, 3 receptions for 59 yards. Dallas Goedert, 7 catches for 44 yards. But your big 2, Devontae Smith, 3 for 16, and A.J. Brown, 1 for 8. Now, Jahan Dotson, most of his production was on that 1 deep shot. I believe it was down the middle. So you take away that 1 deep shot, it would have been 2 receptions for maybe, 10 or so yards for him. Dallas Goedert got a lot of production, but it was just sort of a lot of underneath things. 5-yard plays here and there to Dallas Goedert. Again, a lot of dinking and dunking. Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown were having a hard time finding separation out there against Dallas's pretty good cornerbacks. I also wonder if maybe it was just not their game plan. It felt like it was such a heavy rushing attack, which makes sense when you're going against Dallas. You want to run the football. You don't want to make opportunities for Trevon and Deron Bland to create penalties or create turnovers. So I kind of understand it. I'm really intrigued, though, to see week 2. I'm really intrigued to see if they try to get A.J. Brown more involved, because if not, then we'll see kind of the dynamics of A.J. Brown, because we know A.J. Brown may be a little bit of a diva, so we'll keep an eye on that one. I thought the offensive line played really good, almost dominant football in the first half. But in the second half, you start to see Ezeraku get around Mailata a little bit more. You start to see Marshawn Nealon do some things. The Dallas Cowboys started to get a lot of pressure in that second half. And again, I think it was primarily because of some of the exotic looks they were giving and how they were stacking the box and confusing the offensive line. Not having Landon Dickerson also helped because they were able to push the inside up a little bit more as well. So, I thought the offensive line played really well in the first half. About as good as you could have. The edge rushing play for Dallas was sad out there in the first half. And a big reason why Mailata and Lane Johnson were pushing those little guys around. But then in the second half, Dallas started to, pin their ears back and really get after these guys. And they made some plays in the second half. So I'm not concerned about it. But if Dickerson misses some time, I'm a little bit concerned about this offensive line, because now you're potentially having 2 new guards starting for you. Now, on the defensive side of things, I thought the stars still looked really good. Zach Bond, I thought, had an incredible day. You could give Zach Bond the MVP of this game with that play he made on Miles Sanders, where Miles Sanders looks like he's about to score a touchdown. And had that been Jaden Blue, potentially he does, but Zach Bond makes the game-saving touchdown. You know, they get the fumble, it changes momentum. Yes, you had the weather delay, they couldn't convert on that, but still, you took 7 potential points off the board for the Dallas Cowboys right there. So yeah, I thought Zach Bond played well. Cooper DeJean played okay. I didn't really call his name too much out there. Reed Blankenship, same sort of story here. I thought Quinyon Mitchell, I thought he played pretty not great. Now, nothing was really converted on him. He didn't really give up too many receptions. I only could really think of like 1 or 2 chances where he got actually caught on. But some of the penalties, he definitely was a little handsy out there. I think he had 2 pass interference penalties. So, you know, they kind of went at him a little bit. So keep an eye on that one. I still didn't think he played a bad day. It's just I wanted to throw that out there. Who was really having a rough time out there was that second corner, whether it was Jacorian Bennett, Dory Jackson, or whoever it was. They were getting smoked out there, which kind of was to be expected when you have George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb out there on the field at the same time. One of those corners is going to be lined up against them, and typically it was Dory Jackson who had a really rough day. I'm interested to see what they do to fix that issue. Maybe it's to stick Cooper DeJean on the outside, or maybe to look in free agency to see if they can find somebody else, or maybe Kelly Ringo gets more opportunities. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it was a little bit interesting to see how Dallas was just completely exposing the second outside corner for Philadelphia. I also felt like once Jalen Carter was out the game, they were really not playing well on the defensive line. That was kind of what they pinned their hat on last year, where you had Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith. But this year, it's Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith and Jordan Davis. That second pass rusher really never made noise out there. Nolan Smith did make some plays, but he also had a taunting penalty, which was stupid stuff in and of itself. But, you know, I thought Nolan Smith made a couple plays out there. It's hard to really judge this defensive line without Jalen Carter, so I can't really be too critical of it. But, you know, they really were not that effective throughout most of the game. They started to get home a little bit later in the game with some stunts and, you know, throwing some blitzes at Dak Prescott, but they didn't really do a whole lot of anything fancy, and Dallas was able to move the pile. They were able to run the football effectively. They were solid in pass protection. So yeah, just, you know, we'll see what this defensive line looks like with Jalen Carter, but without them, they don't look very good. So in terms of the defensive play, I'm more concerned about this defense this year than what I was last year. Last year, this was the best defense in the NFL. I'm looking at this defense right now, and, you know, it's hard to judge them without Jalen Carter, but I'm imagining Jalen Carter on this defense making an impact. I think this is potentially still a top 10 defense, but they're going to have to figure out some of these holes that they're missing, right? They got to figure out who the second corner is on the outside. They got to figure out who's the second pass rusher next to Nolan Smith. And I think you got to find other ways to use Jahad Campbell. Jahad Campbell was all over the field. I wouldn't mind seeing him get after the quarterback a little bit. So a little bit worried about the defense, a little bit worried about the offensive line, especially if Dickerson misses time. But they still won the game. Look, they found a way to win this game. They made the stops when necessary. They had the turnover. Jalen Hurts was very effective out there throughout most of the day. I just have higher standards for Philadelphia because they're the defending champs and they're going up against a massive underdog in Dallas. And Dallas probably should have won this game. So, you know, everything was going against Philadelphia on this one. You had all the distractions, all the things that happened during the game. They still found a way to win, so you can't be too mad about what happened. But that's my thoughts on Philadelphia and the Dallas Cowboys. You let me know in the comment section below what you thought about the Dallas Cowboys and what you think about the Philadelphia Eagles. Let me know in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.